All right, what's going on, you guys? Nick here with Nick Strength and Power. I've got a couple more interesting stories for you guys today. The first story that I've got for you guys today, Phil Heath. Did he just announce a 2023 comeback? So this is something that I feel like Phil has been inadvertently hinting at for a while. But in his latest post, there was a couple interesting things about that post that I thought might have suggested a comeback. Number one, in the main part of the post, the screenshot of the tweet, he says he was focusing on life and business, but now that those parts are sorted out, he's ready to fully train. And he says that bodybuilding and functional training so that he can play other sports is his main focus. But if you go to his actual caption and you scroll to the very bottom of what he said there, he says, okay, back to my training as I've got some muscle to put back on. And then he's got a winky face on there. Now, I did comment on his post and he responded. And suffice to say, it was a pretty succinct response. All he said was a winky face. Well, not a winky face. He said a laughing emoji and a little inquisitive monocled emoji, whatever that one is supposed to mean. So there's a couple reasons why I interpret this as a potential comeback. He said in the past in an interview that he feels like he could have been back to 100% a couple years after his hernia surgery and a couple years after fixing that issue instead of coming back immediately like he did in 2020. He said in the past he would have looked better if he waited until 2022 or 2023. Now, another reason recently why I feel like this could be a hint at a comeback is I was watching a recent episode of the Cutler Cast with Jay Cutler and manager Matt, both of whom are close personal friends of Phil Heath. And there were multiple times during the course of that podcast where they were discussing the 2023 Mr. Olympia and how crazy that lineup would be. And there was even a segment where they were talking about how Brett Wilkin was the first guy to qualify officially for 2023. But then they said, and then Phil Heath is also qualified. And they kept referencing Phil in the 2023 Olympia, and then they kept saying they've been telling Phil he needs to do it, and just things along those lines. But there were several times during the course of that podcast that they mentioned Phil Heath and they mentioned the 2023 Olympia together as if it was something that could possibly happen. So maybe they've had some kind of conversation with Phil that we don't know about because they are friends of his, and maybe they know that it's something that he's been thinking about. And even if you don't think that Phil can win the Olympia again, you can't tell me you don't want to see a call-out of Phil and some of these new guys. Phil versus Nick Walker in the same call-out. Phil and Ian, and Phil and Hunter Labrada, and Hadi Chupin again, and Crizzo, and Andrew Jack. It'd be interesting to see Phil, who kind of really is coming from a different era of bodybuilding, and he competed against a whole different era of guys, that now that he would be coming, if he comes back in 2023, a lot of the guys in those top spots would be guys that Phil has never faced at the Olympia before. It would be interesting to watch. And while you would also get to watch Phil kind of revisit those old rivalries with Big Ramy and Brandon and Bonac and guys like that, you'd also get to see how he looks next to these newer guys, Derek and Hunter and Nick. Now, that would be a dream Olympia lineup. Now, speaking of a potentially dream men's open lineup, let's look at Chris Bumstead's latest physique update here. So he's not really giving us much to go off of in this update. It's desaturated, it's black and white, and he's only kind of his physique's only half visible kind of out of the shadows there. But it still is a physique update nonetheless, and again, we can't really see much in terms of the biceps, which is kind of the big question mark that we've had. And I really think that as we look at these updates from Chris Bumstead, we're going to look at an update from Terrence also in this video. As we look at these updates, I think we should keep in the back of our head the update that we just looked at earlier today in the last video of Urs Kalsinski. Urs Kalsinski is brought a next level of conditioning. I was talking to manager Matt today, who was there posing with him, and he said, by the way, it was not at Dragon's Lair. It was at Fit Club, who they say has much better lighting than Dragon's Lair. And he says that not only is he stupid peeled, referring to Urs, he said he filmed him, and he said he's lean like Hadi Chupin. He is that level of lean, and his words to me were, he's going to push Chris. So when you have Urs's conditioning in the back of your mind, looking at the updates of Chris and Terrence, that's what I would compare, is how does Chris look relative to Urs and how does Terrence look relative to Urs? Because Urs, from everything that I'm hearing and from what we've seen from him so far, he really has set quite the standard for conditioning and classic physique, and it looks like he's taking it up a notch this year. According to everybody that I've talked to, this is one of the sickest versions of Urs they've ever seen. So when you look at Bumstead, like this update, like I said, it's hard to glean much from, but while he does look bigger, supposedly he'll be 15 pounds bigger on stage, he doesn't look as conditioned as Urs. So we're going to see how much of a factor conditioning plays. And when I introed this Chris Bumstead segment, I said, speaking of a dream open bodybuilding lineup, depending on how much size Chris puts on, I think he could go in and do a men's open show next year. Without much additional effort, I think he's going to weigh, what is he going to weigh here, like 240 pounds? But it certainly is noticeable that he has added size, regardless of the bicep thing, regardless of anything else. It certainly is pretty apparent that all the updates that we've seen from Chris, he has certainly put on some size, and there's no question in my mind about that he will be bigger on stage this year now that he's working with Hani. And I think it would be an interesting conversation if he jumped in an open lineup and didn't really even add, much additional size from where he is at the Olympia this year. Because I also think you don't want to see Chris Bumstead totally blown out. You don't want to see a massive Chris Bumstead. I think you want to see Chris Bumstead essentially as he is in classic physique. A very big classic competitor take that physique to a men's open bodybuilding stage and see how he does. Not necessarily Chris Bumstead switch to open, put on 30, 40 pounds and have a completely different physique. I think people want to see Chris Bumstead, classic physique Mr. Olympia on an open bodybuilding stage. How does that physique do against open bodybuilders? Is it big enough? And maybe with 15 added pounds, it is. Now, next up in the news, I wanted to continue to look at some other guys that are kind of on the outer range of that top 10. I think the 11, 12, 13, 14, kind of in that range. Antoine Vaillant posted a physique update at 2 weeks out saying he's weighing 270 pounds. And that's kind of where I see Antoine is in maybe that 10 to 15 range. Again, it sounds insulting to say that about anybody, that they're going to be outside of the top 10 and that they're going to likely be 10 to 15. But you got to keep in mind, there's probably 32 competitors competing. So that's the top half of those 32. And I think Antoine is in, maybe you would call it the B list of that Olympia lineup. There's the A-listers, that's like the top 6, top 10. There's the B list that are still in that conversation, maybe pushing for top 10. Then there's the guys that are going to be like outside of the top 15 that are going to be in like a 20-way tie for last place. I don't think Antoine is one of those guys that's going to be in a tie for last place. I think he is in the realm of a James Hollingshead. I think he's in the realm of a Blessing Awodabu. I think he's in the realm of a Charles Griffin, one of these guys that has won shows, one of these guys that's been very impressive, has a good amount of hype. But as much as I like Antoine, I just can't say that I think he's going to be top 10. I think this is a really, really tough one to crack the top 10 here. If I had to guess, that would probably be a call-out that what we would see is like Antoine, Blessing, Justin, James. Who am I missing here? Charles Griffin. That's probably the call-out that I would say would be like to be right outside the top 10. Now, the final story that I've got for you guys today is a posing video from Terrence, and this is actually at 2 weeks out. I know the update from yesterday or the day before were actually prep photos from the Arnold Classic, but these are prep photos for the Olympia, prep video rather, at actually 2 weeks out. And again, I would say while you're watching this, just keep in the back of your mind that conditioning that Urs had, and compare it to what we've seen from Chris Bumstead and Terrence. Will this crazy conditioning from Urs be enough to crack him into that top 3 conversation? I think it might be. I think he's definitely giving both Terrence and Chris Bumstead a serious run for their money in terms of conditioning. But again, because classic physique is so subjective, you got to really ask yourself the question, how much does conditioning really matter, and how much of an edge does it really give to be conditioned past a certain point in classic physique? Because like I said in the previous video, if you look back at the golden era of bodybuilding, nobody had striated glutes. And if classic physique is really supposed to pay homage to that era, is that really going to be that big of a bonus for Urs to be shredded in that way? And I'm not saying, I do think that Terrence and Chris both look good, but it's certainly not on the level of conditioning that we're seeing from Urs. And that's kind of the question that I'm curious to see, is how far will that conditioning carry Urs? Because obviously he's got a good classic physique, but I think he's slightly less of a fit than Terrence's physique or Chris's physique. He doesn't have as good of a structure as they do. So that's why I say how far conditioning will carry him, because it's not going to be his structure that's carrying him necessarily. I think it's going to be that crazy conditioning. So that's going to wrap it up for the video tonight, guys. I hope you did, in fact, enjoy it. Make sure you leave a like if you are enjoying the 2-a-day videos. Subscribe to the channel for more Olympia covers just like this. And as always, I love you guys. Appreciate you guys. Nick Strength and Power signing out. All right, guys, don't forget to click that like button and subscribe to this channel if you enjoy the content. Also, check out my Instagram at Nick Strength Power. My Facebook page, which is simply Nick Strength and Power. My secondary YouTube channel, Nick Strength and Vlogs, for vlogs and bonus content that you will not see on this channel. And consider subscribing to my third YouTube channel, Nick Strength and Pokemon, which is all things Pokemon and trading card games, completely unrelated to this channel. So if you're into that, give that one a look. And all links to merchandise and social media will be in the description box below. If you guys want a Nick Strength and Power t-shirt, that will be in the Shopify link below. Have a great day.